Hey y'all, so check this out. I wanted to talk to y'all about something interesting I just noticed about the story of Jacob, his wives, his sons, but I noticed it when I was reading about the story between his two wives and how they were basically in competition with each other. And I realized, and I talked about this in my last video, where there was this favoritism thing going on, like Isaac had his favorite, which was Esau. I didn't know if that played a role with how they operated around each other. But when you think about Jacob coming into the world, he literally came into the world holding on by the heel of his older brother. And it's like, even in the womb, they were in competition with each other. And it's like, yeah, his older brother might have been bigger, stronger, and outwardly might have been the first choice, but he wasn't going out without a fight. It's something that God looks at the heart, and one thing that Jacob had was heart. That's something you'll see. Even though he didn't always go about it the right way, he always had heart. And there's this thing I noticed, where Jacob was always in competition with his older brother Esau. There was this competitive thing. They were competing with each other. It was toxic as heck. And then when you look at his wives were in competition with each other. Oh, I got these babies. And then one of them's like, oh, snap, she got those babies. Now I gotta have, she didn't even have to compete for real because she was literally the first pick, but she still felt like she had to put in that work in order to be valuable. And like I said, there's this favoritism thing that I already saw with Isaac having favor over Esau as opposed to Jacob. So there's this favoritism thing, and they're like fighting for value. You got his wives in competition with each other. It's toxic, right? It's driving Jacob crazy. He's getting mad. He's like, yo, I'm not God. What you think? Like, I'm not the one who closed your womb. And, she finally has a kid. And then you look at Jacob, the rest of Jacob's kids, and they're in competition, right? He has a favorite, which is Joseph. There's a competition thing keeps going on, right? And it's generational. So it's like, the things that you don't deal with, the things that you don't handle, the things that you don't slay, the things that you don't give up to God, the things that you don't trust God with and let go out of your own hands. Jesus said, unless a seed fall to the ground and die. So it's like the things that you're not willing to give up to God. And it actually goes into some corresponding verses where Jesus said, if you don't love this more than me, if you don't love that more than me, if you're not willing to trust God with what you have, what you've been given, then what do you think is going to happen with it? You know what I mean? You're just fighting, you're just tussling to the point where you're like Jacob, and you're literally to the point of just wrestling, right? Just wrestling. Your whole life just wrestling, tirelessly. And this thing goes on. It goes on through the family. So what you don't deal with is going to be passed on to your kids, your spiritual kids, those you disciple, those you mentor. You impart who you are, impart a piece of you. When people are around you, you rub off on them. So a piece of you gets left behind with the people you're around. But I also want to say this, it's not just for the negative things or the things that come off as toxic. So even though Jacob was always wrestling, competing with his older brother, one thing he had was heart. And God looks at the heart. He doesn't look at the outward appearance, he looks at the heart. He always had heart. He even came into the world holding on to what he knew belonged to him, was that birthright. He was holding on to the promise of God, trusting God, right? He had heart. Where Esau would give up the promise, he would give up the inheritance, he would give up the birthright because he was tired. Jacob was like, nah, this is the one thing that matters to me. Is what I know and hear from God belongs to me. And that's how we gotta be. So not just the fact that he wrestled his whole life, but there's another piece of him that's a good thing that got passed down too. Where when Jacob finally got away from his uncle, he said, look, ever since I came here, you've been blessed off the back of me. Ever since I came here, I never did you ugly. I always did you right. I always was fair. I never complained. There's this integrity thing there. There's this willingness to work, labor, and not complain. That's the story of Joseph all day. So his son, his favorite son, he had to wrestle. When he was with Jacob, his father, he didn't have to work as hard. He was the favorite, but he wrestled after that. Whenever he was sold into slavery, he had to work just like his father. He had to put in that work, and he had to show himself approved. He had to prove himself, and surely he did, which actually goes into the other thing I wanted to talk about. If y'all want to see the next video where I talk about the fear of the Lord and wisdom, then go ahead and click right here.